There is a battlefield that every great warrior in history has had to conquer. It wasn't at Thermopylae, or in the forests of Gaul, or on the plains of Mongolia. It was the 6 inches of terrain between their ears. This is the only war that is truly yours to win or lose, and it is fought every single day. The enemies are not men with swords and shields, they are your own undisciplined thoughts, your unexamined fears, and your comfortable hesitations. You have been told that the modern world is complex, that the challenges are new. This is a comforting lie. The operating system of human struggle has not had a major update in thousands of years. The distractions have changed, the temptations have new names, but the internal war remains the same. The principles required for victory, then, are also timeless. They are not hacks or quick fixes. They are codes, forged in the crucibles of history by men who understood that an unconquerable mind is the only true fortress. Today, I am not going to give you motivation. Motivation is a fleeting emotion, a spark in the dark. I am going to give you an architecture, a blueprint for building an iron mind. We will walk through 10 battle-tested codes from the world's most formidable warriors, but this is not a history lesson. This is an armory. Each principle is a weapon for you to wield in the silent, daily battles you face, in your work, in your relationships, and in the quiet moments when you are alone with your own ambition and doubt. Before we begin, I want you to make a commitment, not to me, but to yourself. By the end of our time together, you will choose one of these codes, not to admire, but to live, to integrate into your very being for the next 30 days. This is the first step in moving from a man who reacts to the world to a man who creates his own. The first principle comes from the famously stoic and disciplined culture of Sparta. Spartan mothers, when sending their sons to war, would hand them their shield and say, "E tan, e epitas," come back with your shield or on it. There was no third option. There was no, "I'll try my best." There was no honorable retreat. There was only victory or death, total, uncompromising commitment. Now, in our modern world, we are taught the opposite. We are told to hedge our bets, to have a plan B, a plan C, to keep our options open. We build elaborate escape routes from our own goals before we've even taken the first step on the path. This is not wisdom, it is cowardice disguised as strategy. Every backup plan you create is a quiet testament to your lack of faith in your primary objective. It is an investment of energy into the possibility of your own failure. I learned this lesson the hard way. Early in my career, I was running a software company. We landed a project that was, to put it mildly, beyond our capacity at the time. It was a career-defining opportunity, but the deadline was brutal. For the first month, we made sluggish progress. My team was working hard, but there was an unspoken safety net. We all knew that if we failed, we could issue an apology, perhaps take a small financial hit, and move on to the next client. The escape route was there, and our subconscious minds were clinging to it. The crucible moment came during a team meeting. We were behind schedule and morale was low. I stood up and I told them, "As of this moment, there is no other client. I have cleared our pipeline. There is no next project. There is only this. We will deliver this on time, or we will shut the doors." I wasn't bluffing. I had burned the ships. The mood in the room shifted instantly. The anxiety didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became fuel. The possibility of failure was no longer an abstract concept, it was a real, immediate, and unacceptable outcome. We stopped hedging and started innovating. We worked not just harder, but with a ferocity and focus I had never seen. We delivered the project. That single act of removing the exit door did more for our success than 100 strategy sessions. Your modern action is this. Burn your backup plans. Identify the one goal you are currently half committed to. Is it a business, a fitness goal, a relationship you're not fully invested in? Now, how can you remove the exit doors? If you want to get fit, don't just say you'll go to the gym. pay for a full year up front and hire a trainer you can't afford to ghost. If you want to start a business, don't just work on it on the side. Announce your launch date publicly. Make quitting more embarrassing, more painful than the struggle of pushing through. Ask yourself these questions. What shield are you carrying toward your most important goal? And, more importantly, what escape routes have you secretly built for yourself in case you decide to drop it? Are you truly committed, or are you just interested in the idea of success? The second principle is drawn from the warrior philosophers of feudal Japan, the samurai. They lived by a code known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. At the absolute center of this code was a concept that is almost alien to our modern sensibilities: giri, a sense of duty and honor so profound that it was held as more valuable than life itself. A samurai's entire existence was built upon a foundation of non-negotiable values. To betray this code, to act without honor, was a fate worse than death. It was a spiritual suicide. In our world, we are constantly tempted to trade our honor for comfort, our integrity for profit, our values for validation. We are told to be flexible, but this flexibility often becomes a slow, creeping erosion of the self. The modern application of Bushido is not about seeking death, but about defining what you are willing to live for. It is about defining your non-negotiable values and living by them, even when, especially when, it costs you something. This is the bedrock of an iron mind. A man who does not know what he stands for will fall for anything. He becomes a ghost, pushed and pulled by the winds of public opinion, market trends, and peer pressure. I once mentored a young man, a brilliant strategist in the finance industry. He was on the fast track, making more money than he had ever dreamed of. He came to me one day, deeply conflicted. His firm was involved in a deal that was legally sound but ethically questionable. It would exploit a loophole that would harm a smaller, less sophisticated company. His bonus for participating was life-changing money. He knew it was wrong, but the gray area was immense. Everyone was doing it. He was told it was just good business. He spent weeks in agony, his mind a chaotic mess. The external rewards were screaming at him, but his internal code was whispering. I didn't give him the answer. I simply asked him to do an exercise. I had him write down the 3 values he wanted to define his life. He wrote integrity, mastery, and legacy. Then I asked him, 10 years from now, when you look back at this moment, which choice builds the man you want to be? Which action aligns with those 3 words? He came back to me a week later. He had refused the deal. Not only that, he had resigned from his position. His bosses were stunned. They called him a fool. In the short term, it cost him dearly. He lost his bonus, his job, and the certainty of his career path. But he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "For the first time in years, my mind is quiet. I feel poor, but I don't feel cheap." He had chosen honor over profit. What happened next was the interesting part. Word of his decision quietly circulated. A few months later, he was approached by a rival firm, one with a reputation for ethical practice. They had heard about his stand. They weren't just hiring his skills, they were hiring his character. He ended up in a better position, with a team that respected him, doing work he could be proud of. He learned that your reputation, built on a foundation of unshakable values, is the most valuable asset you will ever own. Your practical action is this. Take out a piece of paper. Write down your top 3 values. Not words you think sound nice, but the principles you genuinely believe should govern your life. Now look at your calendar, your career, your relationships. Where is there a conflict? Where are you compromising? The next step is to practice saying no. No to the opportunity that clashes with your values. No to the small temptation that erodes your integrity. No to the crowd when they are moving in a direction you know is wrong. Each no is a brick in the wall of your inner citadel. Now, reflect on this. Which of your values would you refuse to betray, even if it cost you a fortune. What is the price you are unwilling to pay for success? Our third principle comes from the seafaring raiders of the North, the Vikings. We have this modern image of them as fearless, brutish berserkers. But that's a caricature. No sane human is fearless. A man who feels no fear is not brave. He is a danger to himself and others. The Vikings were not without fear, they simply had a different relationship with it. They sailed into unknown storms and charged into battles against superior numbers. They faced the constant probability of a violent death. Their courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. They understood a fundamental truth that we have forgotten. Fear is a signal to act, not a stop sign. In our modern lives, we have engineered comfort to an unprecedented degree. We have insulated ourselves from physical risk, but in doing so, we have become hypersensitive to emotional and psychological risk. We fear rejection, failure, embarrassment, and uncertainty. And when we feel that knot in our stomach, our programming screams at us to retreat, to play it safe, to return to the comfort of the known. A warrior's mindset sees that same feeling and interprets it differently. That feeling of fear, of nervousness, is not a warning that you are in danger. It is an announcement that you are at the edge of your comfort zone, and therefore at the precipice of growth. The fear is a compass pointing you directly toward the action you most need to take. I remember my early days as an entrepreneur. I had to pitch our company to venture capitalists, powerful figures who could make or break our future with a single nod or shake of the head. And I was terrified of public speaking. My heart would pound, my palms would sweat, my mind would go blank. My instinct was to avoid it at all costs, to send a partner, to do anything but stand in that conference room and face that scrutiny. For a time, I did just that, and our company stagnated. The fear was winning. The change came when I stopped trying to eliminate the fear and started trying to use it. I found a Stoic passage from Marcus Aurelius, where he talks about getting out of bed in the morning to do the work of a human being. He essentially asks himself, were you born to huddle under the blankets and stay warm, or to go out and do things? I reframed my thinking. The physical sensations of fear, the adrenaline, the heightened awareness, are identical to the sensations of excitement. The only difference is the label you put on it. I started telling myself, this isn't fear, this is readiness. My body is preparing me for battle. Before each pitch, instead of hiding from the feeling, I would find a quiet place and intentionally amplify it. I'd do push-ups, take deep, powerful breaths. I leaned into the energy. I began to treat fear as a partner. It was the signal that what I was about to do was important. The fear never vanished. To this day, I feel a jolt before a big presentation. But it is no longer my enemy. It is my signal to advance. Your practical action is to wage a daily war on hesitation. Treat courage like a muscle that must be trained. Start small. Do one thing every day that makes you uncomfortable. Have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Take a cold shower. Sign up for the class you know you'll be terrible in at first. Make that sales call you're afraid to make. Each time you act despite fear, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. You are rewiring your brain to understand that you are the one in command, not your fleeting emotions. Keep a log of these courage wins. At the end of the week, look back at the evidence you have gathered, the evidence that you are capable of facing down your own resistance. So, I ask you, what fear have you been allowing to write the script of your life? What is one small, uncomfortable action you will take today to reclaim authorship? We now turn to the principle that formed the very backbone of the Roman Empire's greatest leaders, from generals to emperors. It is the philosophy that allowed them to command legions, govern vast territories, and endure the chaos of war and politics without losing their minds. Stoicism. And at the absolute core of Stoic practice is a simple, yet profoundly powerful mental model known as the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, a slave who became one of Rome's most influential philosophers, taught it this way: some things are within our power, while others are not. That's it. That is the beginning and the end of all practical wisdom. The secret to tranquility and effectiveness is to relentlessly, ruthlessly focus your energy only on what is in your control, and to accept with grace everything that is not. This sounds simple. It is anything but. We spend the vast majority of our lives in a state of internal rebellion against reality. We rage against the traffic, we despair over the economy, we are consumed with anxiety about what others think of us, we are frustrated by the past, and we are terrified of the future. All of these things are completely, unequivocally outside of our control. To waste a single moment of emotional or mental energy on them is, from a Stoic perspective, the definition of insanity. It's like trying to command the tide or shout at the rain. A Roman general understood he could not control the weather on the day of battle, nor could he control the enemy's strategy. But he could control his own preparations, the training of his men, his own courage on the field, and the clarity of his commands. That was his world. The rest was fate, and a wise man does not argue with fate. I lived through this during the dot-com crash of the early 2000s. The market, which had seemed like an endless fountain of gold, dried up overnight. Companies worth billions one day were worth nothing the next. Panic was everywhere. I saw colleagues, brilliant people, have complete breakdowns. They were watching their life's work, their fortunes, evaporate for reasons that had nothing to do with them. They were chained to the outcome, and the outcome was brutal. My own company was hit hard. We lost 70% of our valuation in a matter of weeks. The temptation to despair was immense. In the midst of that chaos, I clung to this principle like a life raft. Every morning, I would take a pen and paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, I wrote, uncontrollable. On the other, controllable. Under uncontrollable, the stock market, the actions of investors, the news cycle, the fear of our competitors. Under controllable, my response to my team's fear, the clarity of my communication, the decision to cut expenses honorably, the effort I put into finding new revenue streams, my own physical and mental health, my refusal to panic. My entire world shrank to that second column. I poured every ounce of my energy into those few things. The storm raged outside, but inside our walls we had a plan. We had a purpose. We focused on our actions, not the external chaos. We survived. Not only did we survive, we emerged leaner, tougher, and more resilient than ever before. We won because we refused to fight a battle we could never win, the battle against reality. We focused on the only war that mattered, the war within. Your modern action is to adopt this daily practice. At the start of each day, or whenever you feel overwhelmed, perform this control audit. Make a list of your worries and anxieties. Then sort them into those two columns: in my hands or not in my hands. Be brutally honest. Your boss's mood? Not in your hands. The quality of the report you submit? In your hands. The outcome of the job interview? Not in your hands. The quality of your preparation? In your hands. Then consciously release the first list. Let it go. It is not your concern. Focus your entire being on executing the second list with excellence. This is how you build an unbreakable mind. Ask yourself this: how much of your precious, finite energy are you spending trying to command things that you have no authority over? What is one thing from your uncontrollable list that you can choose to let go of right now? For our fifth principle, we journey to the mist-covered lands of the Celts. For the Celtic warrior, a man's honor and reputation were not personal attributes, they were a form of spiritual currency. A person's name, their legacy, was everything. It dictated how they were treated, who would follow them into battle, and how they would be remembered in the songs and stories of their clan for generations. They understood that you build this reputation not with grand, heroic gestures, but through the accumulation of small, consistent, principled actions. Your reputation is not what you claim to be. It is what your actions declare you to be, day in and day out. This stands in stark contrast to our modern culture of personal branding, where image is often valued more than substance. We are taught to craft a narrative to manage perceptions. The Celts would have found this bizarre. For them, reputation is everything, and it is forged in the fire of your daily choices. The core Stoic idea here is that we should be more concerned with our character than with our reputation. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself to not worry about what others think. But there is a synthesis here. A proper reputation is simply the natural byproduct of a virtuous character. If you focus on being a person of integrity, competence, and reliability, a powerful reputation will follow as a matter of course. The goal is not to have people think you are honorable. The goal is to be honorable. The legacy then takes care of itself. This is about building your life as if your every action will be carved into stone for all to see. I saw this principle play out in the career of a mentee who was a master craftsman, a carpenter. He was an artist with wood, but he struggled with the business side of things. His competitors were slick marketers. They had flashy websites, big logos on their trucks, and they were experts at selling the dream. My mentee, by contrast, was quiet. He underpromised and overdelivered. He would spend an extra day on a project, losing money on his time just to get a joint perfect, even if it was a part of the construction no one would ever see. He was obsessed with the integrity of the work itself. For years, it seemed like the marketers were winning. They got the bigger, more profitable jobs. He came to me, frustrated, wondering if he should change his approach, if he should start cutting corners to compete. I told him, "You are not building cabinets. You are building your name. Every perfect joint, every seamless finish is a signature. Keep signing your name with excellence." He stuck with it. Slowly, something began to shift. The flashy work of his competitors began to show its flaws, a warped board here, a cheap hinge there. But his work endured. It was solid, perfect. Word began to spread, not through marketing, but through quiet conversations between homeowners, architects, and designers. If you want it done right, they'd say, "You have to get this guy." His reputation became his marketing. It was a slow build, but it was indestructible. Today, he has a years-long waiting list and names his own price. He never had to sell anyone. His work, his consistent, principled action, did the selling for him. He built a legacy, one perfect cut at a time. Your practical action is to begin with the end in mind. Define how you want to be remembered, not in a grandiose, abstract way. In one word, is it reliable, honest, courageous, wise? Write that word down. Now, for the next week, before you make any significant choice, sending an email, starting a project, having a conversation, ask yourself a simple question. Which action is more aligned with my word? This question becomes your compass. It simplifies the complex. It forces you to make daily choices that align with the legacy you intend to build. You start asking, what would the ideal version of myself do in this situation? And then you do that. So, reflect on this. If the story of your life were to be told after you are gone, what would you want the title of that story to be? What single word defines the reputation you are building with your actions today? The sixth principle takes us to the vast, open steppes of Asia, the domain of the Mongol Empire. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, a scattered group of nomadic tribes was forged into one of the most effective and relentless military forces in human history. Their success was not due to superior technology or rigid doctrine. It was due to their mastery of one key principle: adaptability. The Mongol warrior was the epitome of strategic flexibility. They could fight as heavy cavalry, light archers, or even infantry. They learned and incorporated the technologies of the people they conquered. They were constantly observing, learning, and adjusting. Their motto could have been, "Bend like the reed in the wind, but stand firm like the mountain in your purpose." They were masters of changing their tactics without ever losing sight of their core objective. This is a crucial lesson for the modern mental battlefield. We often fall in love with our plans, our methods, our routines. When they stop working, we don't change the plan, we just try to execute it with more force. We mistake stubbornness for discipline. A true warrior philosopher understands that the plan is nothing, the principle is everything. You must be willing to ruthlessly assess your strategies and discard what is not working, but never, ever compromise the core values that guide you. As the Stoics would say, you control your choices and actions, but you do not control the outcomes. Therefore, when the outcomes are not what you desire, the only logical thing to do is to adjust your actions. You must be a strategist, not a dogmatist. In my tech career, the landscape changed almost daily. A new competitor, a shift in programming languages, a change in market sentiment. It was a constant storm. I saw so many companies fail because their leaders were rigid. They had a 5-year plan carved in stone, and they were going to stick to it, even as the ground crumbled beneath their feet. They were married to their tactics. My own company faced a moment like this. We had invested over a year and millions of dollars into developing a product based on a specific technology platform. It was our master plan. Halfway through development, a new, far superior platform emerged. It made our entire project look obsolete before it was even finished. The team was split. Half wanted to push forward, to stick to the plan. They argued, "We've invested too much to turn back now." This is the sunk cost fallacy, a cognitive bias that has destroyed more businesses than any recession. The other half wanted to pivot, to abandon the old work and embrace the new, better technology, even though it meant starting over in many ways. It was a brutal decision. We had to sacrifice our ego and a year of hard work, but we chose to adapt. We bent like the reed. We kept our core principle, to build the best possible product for our customers, but we completely changed our tactic. It was painful. It set us back months, but it ultimately saved the company. Our competitor, who stuck to the old technology, launched their product 6 months before us and were irrelevant within a year. They were rigid. They broke. We were adaptable. We thrived. Your practical action is to schedule a weekly strategy review with yourself. It can be just 15 minutes every Sunday. Look back at the past week. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. 1. What worked? 2. What didn't work? 3. What will I do differently next week? This is not a session for self-criticism. It is a tactical debrief. Are your daily habits moving you toward your goals? Is your communication style getting the results you want? Is your financial plan holding up in reality? You must be willing to look at your own performance with the detached objectivity of a general reviewing battlefield reports. Adjust your tactics. Experiment, but never lose sight of the core mission. Ask yourself these questions. Where in your life are you being rigid when you need to be flexible? Are you clinging to a method that is no longer serving your ultimate goal, simply because it is familiar? The 7th warrior code comes from the age of castles and quests, from the knights of medieval Europe. Beyond the armor and the jousting, at the heart of the knightly ideal was the code of chivalry. And chivalry, at its core, is the radical idea that strength is not for self-aggrandizement. True strength is for service. A knight's power, his skill with the sword, and his position in society was not meant for conquest and personal gain alone, but to protect the weak, to uphold justice, and to serve a higher purpose. The principle is this: your strength is a tool to lift others, not just a weapon to advance yourself. This concept runs deep in classical philosophy as well. The Stoics referred to it as sympatheia, the idea that all things are interconnected and that we are all part of a larger whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is not good for the beehive is not good for the bee." A life focused solely on the self is therefore unnatural and, ultimately, unfulfilling. True strength, true success, is measured not by what you accumulate for yourself, but by the positive impact you have on the community you are a part of. In our hyper-individualistic modern world, this is a revolutionary idea. We are taught to climb the ladder and then kick it away. Chivalry asks us to climb and then lend a hand to the person below. I learned the true meaning of this principle after I had achieved what most people would call success. I had the money, the recognition, the successful company. But a quiet hollowness had set in. The thrill of the next deal, the next quarter's earnings. It was a diminishing return. My focus had been entirely on my own ascent. The shift happened unexpectedly. A young entrepreneur reached out to me. He was just starting out, facing all the same struggles I had faced 2 decades earlier, and he was on the verge of giving up. On a whim, I agreed to meet him for coffee. I listened to his challenges, and I didn't offer platitudes. I gave him concrete, hard-won advice. I opened up my network to him. I shared my failures. That 1-hour meeting did more for my own sense of purpose than any business deal I had ever closed. Seeing the spark of hope and clarity in his eyes was a different kind of wealth. I began to formalize it, setting aside a few hours every week to mentor young leaders. I started to view my knowledge and experience not as my private treasure, but as a resource to be shared. It transformed my relationship with my own success. It was no longer just about me. My strength, my experience, my network, they found a new, deeper purpose in serving others who were fighting the same battles I had already won. It completed the circle. It turns out that the beehive is, in fact, what nourishes the bee. This is your practical application. Use your strengths to serve. First, identify your unique strengths. Are you a great listener? A skilled planner? Do you have knowledge in a specific field? Now, identify who you can help with those skills. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. You can mentor one person. You can volunteer your skills for a local nonprofit. You can simply be the person in your group of friends who offers practical help instead of just sympathy. Look at the battles you have already won in your life. Overcoming a bad habit, learning a difficult skill, navigating a tough career change. Find someone who is currently in the middle of that battle and offer them your map. Think about this. What is the greatest victory you have achieved in your own life? And who is one person you could help this week using the wisdom you gained from that fight? Our 8th principle is drawn from the powerful and highly structured society of the Aztecs. In the Aztec Empire, a warrior's rank and social standing were not primarily determined by his birthright or his family's wealth. It was determined by his merit, specifically his courage and effectiveness in battle. A warrior advanced by capturing enemies, by proving his worth on the battlefield. The path to honor was through action, not through rhetoric. The principle is simple and brutal in its honesty. Let your results, not your words, earn you respect. Your place in the world is not something you are given, it is something you earn every single day. This is a direct antidote to the modern obsession with self-promotion, with talking about the work instead of doing the work. We live in an age of gurus and influencers who are famous for being famous. They talk a great game, they project an image of success, but often, when you look behind the curtain, there is little substance. They have mastered the art of the announcement, but not the art of the achievement. An Aztec warrior would have no concept of this. Your words were meaningless. Your boasts were empty air. Your value was measured in tangible results. This aligns perfectly with the Stoic emphasis on action over proclamation. Seneca wrote, "I will not teach you philosophy, I will show it to you." True worth is demonstrated, not declared. Early in my career, I had a business partner who was a master of words. He could captivate a room, paint a vision, and sell an idea like no one I've ever met. He was brilliant in meetings. Investors loved him. Our intentions always sounded world-changing. The problem was, his work ethic never matched his rhetoric. He would talk about the all-nighters we needed to pull, but he was never there for them. He would speak of a commitment to excellence, but his own work was often rushed and superficial. For a while, his charisma carried us, but eventually, reality comes calling. Clients noticed missed deadlines. The team noticed the disparity between his talk and his walk. The respect he commanded began to erode, slowly at first, then all at once. The currency of his words had been devalued to nothing because they were not backed by the gold standard of results. I learned from that experience that you must be your own harshest critic and your own most demanding drill sergeant. I adopted a simple rule for myself and my team. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me how hard you're working. Show me the progress on the project. Don't tell me you're a great leader. Show me by the morale and performance of your team. Don't tell me you're learning a new skill. Show me what you can build with it. This shifts the entire focus from a culture of appearances to a culture of achievement. It replaces the noise of intention with the quiet confidence of competence. You stop worrying about getting credit and start focusing on being credible. Respect, you learn, is not something you can demand. It is a tribute paid to you by others in recognition of your demonstrated value. Your modern action is to focus on skill building and tangible output. Choose one area of your life where you want to earn more respect, be it your career, a hobby, or your role in your family. Now, for the next 30 days, commit to spending less time talking about it and more time doing it. If you want a promotion, stop talking about why you deserve it and focus on a project you can execute so flawlessly that it makes your value undeniable. If you want to be a writer, stop talking about the book you're going to write and produce one finished page a day. Celebrate real, tangible wins, no matter how small. Share your progress, not your grand intentions. Let your results speak for themselves. They are far more eloquent than you will ever be. Reflect on this. In the last month, what have you produced versus what have you proposed? What tangible thing have you earned with your actions, not just your words? For our 9th principle, we return to the samurai of Japan, but we look at a different aspect of their discipline. A samurai on the battlefield had to be a master of the present moment. A single lapse in concentration, a thought about yesterday's battle or tomorrow's meal, could mean instant death. His survival depended on his ability to be completely and totally present, his senses sharp, his mind clear of all clutter. This state of intense focus is a warrior's skill, known in Zen philosophy as Zanshin. It is a state of relaxed awareness, of being fully present in the moment. The principle for us is present moment mastery, and in our age of constant distraction, it is perhaps the most critical warrior skill of all. The modern world is waging a relentless war against your attention. Your smartphone, social media feeds, the 24-hour news cycle, they are all designed to splinter your focus into 1,000 tiny shards. We multitask, believing we are being productive, when in reality we are giving a fraction of our mental capacity to multiple things and achieving excellence in none of them. This chronic state of distraction is making us weak. It is robbing us of our ability to do deep, meaningful work, to have genuine connections with others, and to simply be at peace in our own minds. As the Stoics understood, our power lies in our ability to direct our conscious awareness. When we surrender that ability to external stimuli, we surrender our power. A scattered mind is a conquered mind. I confess, I was once an apostle of multitasking. My desk was a chaotic shrine to it. Multiple monitors with flashing data, phone buzzing, emails pouring in. I believed that being busy was the same as being effective. I prided myself on juggling a dozen things at once. The reality was that I was doing a dozen things poorly. My work was superficial. My conversations were shallow because I was always half thinking about something else. My stress levels were through the roof. The change came from an unlikely place, a vacation where I had no internet or cell service for a week. The first 2 days were torture. I felt phantom vibrations from my pocket. My mind was twitchy, craving the next hit of information. But by the 3rd day, a profound calm began to settle over me. My thoughts became clearer, more linear. When I read a book, I was just reading. When I spoke with my wife, I was just listening. When I returned, I vowed to bring that focus back with me. I started treating my attention as my most sacred resource. I implemented a practice the modern world finds radical: single tasking. I set aside specific blocks of time for deep work. During these blocks, my phone was in another room, all notifications were off, all irrelevant tabs were closed. I would focus on one and only one important task. The results were astounding. I accomplished more high-quality work in a 2-hour focused block than I had in a typical 8-hour day of distracted chaos. My thinking became sharper, my solutions more creative, and my stress levels plummeted. I had retaken the territory of my own mind. Your practical action is to begin training your focus like a muscle. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Sit in a quiet room with no distractions. No phone, no music. Your task is to focus on a single thing. It could be your breath. It could be a candle flame. It could be a single thought. When your mind wanders, and it will, your job is not to get frustrated, but to gently and firmly bring it back. That is the exercise. The act of returning your focus is the rep. Do this every day. In your work, banish multitasking. When you are working on a task, work on that task. When you are talking to someone, listen. Schedule digital detoxes, an hour, an evening, a full day, where you are free from the tyranny of the screen. Reclaim your presence. So I ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being total mastery, how would you rate your ability to stay focused on a single important task without distraction? How much of your day is truly yours, and how much is given away to the demands of others and the whims of algorithms? We arrive at the final principle. This is not the code of a single culture, but a universal law that echoes across every warrior tradition we have discussed, from Sparta to Japan, from the Vikings to the Knights. It is the ultimate expression of commitment to one's principles. It is the line in the sand. The code is death before dishonor. To the ancient warrior, this was often a literal choice. They would choose to die on the battlefield rather than flee in cowardice. They would choose ritual suicide rather than live with the shame of betraying their lord or their code. For us, in our modern context, the stakes are rarely life and death, but the principle remains the same. It is about knowing your unbreakable code, identifying your non-negotiables, and having the courage to stand by them, even when it brings about a form of social or career death. This is the culmination of all the other principles. Your discipline, your values, your courage, your focus, they are all tested at this single point. There will come a time in your life, in your career, when you are asked to cross a line. You will be tempted or pressured to do something that you know is wrong, that violates the person you claim to be. It may be a small lie. It may be a minor ethical breach. It may be a demand to remain silent in the face of injustice. This is the moment of truth. This is where you decide if your principles are merely preferences, or if they are the very foundation of your soul. A mind of iron is not flexible on matters of core principle. I have faced this moment myself. Years ago, during a critical negotiation for a company merger, our negotiating partner demanded something that was, while not illegal, deeply unethical. It would have required us to betray the trust of a long-standing supplier who had been with us since the beginning. My advisors, my lawyers, even some on my board, urged me to concede. They said it was the cost of doing business, that it was a small price to pay for a deal that would make everyone incredibly wealthy. They argued that if we didn't do it, the entire deal would collapse, destroying years of work. They were framing it as a choice between pragmatism and foolish idealism. I remember sitting in that sterile conference room, the billion-dollar contract on the table, and I thought about all the principles I had tried to build my life and my company on: integrity, honor, Reputation. I realized that signing that paper would be a form of suicide. I would get the money, but I would lose myself. I would be a walking ghost, a man who had sold his core for comfort. In the decisive moment, I stood up, looked the other party in the eye, and said, "We will not do that." I walked away from the deal. In the short term, it was a disaster. The market punished us. People called me a fool. It was a form of career death. But just like the mentee who chose honor over profit, walking away solidified who we were. It became the defining story of our company's culture. We had drawn our line in the sand. We chose honor over the deal. We survived that death and rebuilt, stronger and with a reputation that money could never buy. This is your final and most important action. Define your line. Sit down and write your personal death before dishonor code. What are the one or two things you will simply never do, regardless of the pressure or the reward? What is the hill you are willing to die on? This is not an intellectual exercise. This is you forging the final wall of your inner citadel. And once you know your line, you must practice defending it in small ways. Practice daily acts of integrity. Tell the truth when a white lie would be easier. Take responsibility for a mistake when you could easily blame someone else. Each small act of integrity is training for the day the great test arrives, because it will arrive, and you will be ready. These 10 codes are not just ancient wisdom. They are a blueprint for building an unbreakable mind. A mind that is disciplined, honorable, courageous, focused, and adaptable. A mind that serves others, earns its place, and knows precisely where it stands. They are the tools to win the only war that truly matters. Now, I return to the commitment you made at the beginning. It is time to choose. Which one of these 10 codes will you make your own? Which principle will you live and breathe for the next 30 days? This is not about perfection. It is about practice. Post your choice in the comments below. Declare your intention, not for me, but for you. It is the first act of a warrior. If you are ready to stop being a passive observer of your own life and start forging your iron mind, then subscribe. Join this community of individuals committed to the difficult but worthy path of self-mastery. The work is hard, but the reward is a quiet mind and an unconquerable spirit, and that is worth everything.